Well,
Okay.
hello everyone. My name is Brian DiNapoli. The name of this podcast is NIL Mindset. This is a passion project of mine where I provide resources for student athletes and parents on financial literacy, mental health, drug and alcohol prevention, NIL, and other resources. And today we have a very special guest to talk about finances. And he has many years experiences in the financial sector. He also played college football. And I met this gentleman a few months ago volunteering at a school, and just talking to him a few times, I know he has a servant's heart. So his name is Mr. Mike Martin. So Mike, why don't you introduce yourself and how are you? Where do you live and where are you from?
Okay. Thank you, Brian. I live in what I call Houston, Georgia. They pronounce it Houston. I grew up in Houston, Texas, and born and raised. Grew up on a 200-acre farm, and you work hard on a farm when you grow up on a farm. And God blessed me with a little speed, and got to play 4 years collegiate football at the University of North Texas. And I think I was smart enough to know that was probably going to be the end of my playing years was in college. I think every young boy dreams about going and playing in the NFL, but it takes a special talent, gifted talent to do that. And so when my years were finished at college, it was like, I can close that chapter and move on. But that's where I think that a lot of people get to is they get to that door and it's like, what do I do from here? You know, because when you start playing at an early age, any sport, you dedicate your most of your life in that when you're engaged in that game. So, but that's how I got started, and then a friend of mine introduced me to the financial industry. So, and that's been my career for the last 40 years, and I know we're going to get into some of that, but.
So it sounds like you were a really good athlete in high school. What about your high school career? What position did you play, and what was the whole recruitment process like going to North Texas?
Okay. I grew up in, it was, we were known as the Hicks from the Sticks because we were out in the country. But that area became one of the fastest growing areas, a suburb of Houston, Texas. And so when I graduated, there was about 760 kids in my high school. So we were always a contender in sports. Winning quarterfinals or going to semifinals and state championship and all that stuff. But you played every sport. You played, football, track, basketball, baseball. But my dad put an end to that because, when you get old enough to work on a farm, it's like, no, you can't be playing baseball in the summer. So he said, you can have two sports. And so I ended up playing football and running track. But football, I was on before I became a senior in high school. I played both ways as an offensive running back and a defensive back. And then in high school, my senior year, they only let you go one way. So it was monster man, or what I call outside linebacker, or a strong safety position. And with my speed, that helped a lot. But then in college, they moved me out to a corner, and I really enjoyed that. I had 4 years of playing that position, and underneath the leadership and tutelage of a coach named Hayden Fry. And so we had a couple of great years before he left and went to Iowa. And I talked to probably maybe 8 or 9 guys that I played ball with that are real close, and we stay together, stay in communication. So.
That's amazing. I know Hayden Fried was a legendary coach at Iowa, so that was really
Yes.
great experiences playing for him. And I know high school football in Texas is huge, like it is in Georgia, but I would say Texas number one. What was the culture like playing high school football there?
Well, in high school, it's kind of like there's a movie called Friday Night Lights, and we had a double-decker stadium, so we would have on average maybe 18, 19 to 25,000 fans in a high school there at that high school. And which is surprisingly, because we live here in Georgia now, and we go to some of the high school games, and the only time you see that is when they're in the playoffs, a state championship. But that was every weekend when we played ball, you know, especially schools like Odessa Permian, Midland, and we had, there was like a 3 or 4 school rival, um, that we had, and so one school would beat us for like years in a row, and we would beat another school for years in a row. So depending upon who won that against that one team, went to the next level. So
I love Friday Night Lights. I've probably seen it 10 times. It's really my favorite sports movie. Would you say that captures the essence of high school football in Texas? I want to say it took place in 1988. I've read the book and I saw the
yeah,
documentary on the other team you mentioned, Midland.
right. Well, when I was growing up, uh, I'd never seen a soccer ball, didn't know anything about soccer. That was not in really the primary sports were football and basketball, even in Texas. And that's what everybody came to the games. That's what everybody watched. Uh, if baseball had, 3 or 4 thousand fans there, that was a big game, you know. And but we could fill the stands from that standpoint, and that's what people that was their entertainment. They would do that and come watch the team. And like I said, we had years that we would go to semifinals, quarterfinals, and state championship. And so you're always pulling for a winning team.
That must have been incredible experience. And I know, from the movie and reading the book that, every store would close, the car dealerships, it would, have the sign gone to the game.
Yes, yes. I don't know if it was that fanatical. It's just that we had a lot of people that lived around us, and because people are passionate about football, and you have arch rivals that you play against. There was a school that I don't think they had beaten us in 21 or 24 years, and it was kind of like it's kind of like in the college level, Georgia plays somebody like um, Georgia Southern, you don't expect Georgia Southern to even get a touchdown. If they do, it's lucky. And but that was our kind of like our warm up team that we would play against.
Yeah, speaking of Georgia Southern, there was about 10 years ago, we had trouble with them. We beat them in overtime, but
Oh,
that may have been the very end of Mark Richt's career, but no, that's excellent.
yeah.
Wow. Now, how did football shape your career path?
I look at people that are successful in business, successful in life, and it seems like a lot of them played sports because in sports you've got a team concept. You're part of a team, and everybody makes a contribution, and then at the same time, it's an emotional game. It's an individual game, and you're going to be challenged. We are all challenged in life and in anything that we do, but on the gridiron, you're challenged that way as well. And you're either making a contribution and supporting the team, or you're the guy that's the goat that either got a touchdown passed against you or you missed a tackle, whatever that may be. And but those emotions that you go through and the discipline that it takes to play at that kind of level prepares you for life, anything in life that they can throw out at you, you know. And again, I'm very thankful that I chose that path. I love sports, but there was a second denominator. If I was playing sports, I wasn't on the farm working, so there was kind of an incentive to be good.
Yeah, and that was actually in the movie too. I think one of the guys, Friday Night Lights, worked on a farm, and then he was sort
Okay,
of tugged from football to farming. I was thinking about someone like a Dabo Sweeney that was a walk on, and he talked about exactly what you were saying, Mike, building that discipline and that mentality. And of course, he's one of the top college footballs today. So I
right,
immediately thought of him. And of course, I'm a passionate Georgia fan.
right,
Kirby Smart didn't play in the NFL, but just a resilient guy that, of course, to me, he's probably the best coach in the game today.
right.
So looking back, getting into more of the financial parts of it, what do you wish you had known about managing money as a college athlete?
I don't. My parents didn't know anything about money and finance. There was 6 of us kids, 3 boys, 3 girls. We lived in a little 2 bedroom, what I call a shack, a little 2 bedroom house, 1 bathroom, and we were pretty much dirt poor growing up. And dad worked hard to provide. Mom stayed at home and kind of ran the books for my dad's business. And but there was always just enough, but never more than enough, if that makes sense. And I look at some of the things that I know today, and the reason why my wife and I we give back to some of the kids in junior high is if they're exposed to concepts, financial concepts of how money works and staying out of debt, they've got a shot at doing something that their parents probably weren't able to do because the greatest asset that we have is our time, our youth, our age to allow money to grow and compound. But I wish somebody had coached me about money and finance like I was coached in football, and we won great games because we had great coaches and we had good players. And it's the same thing in the financial industry. Most people think, well, I can figure this out on my own. And by the time they start looking at what they need to do, they may be well over in their 40s or 50s, and they've missed the best time, which is when they were younger. You know, and as you know, Brian, we support a couple of schools here in the Gwinnett County with teaching kids about the finances, and we're making an impact, and that's what's exciting, giving back to the community.
Well, you're right about that, Mike. So many athletes learn about money the hard way. And I read about Frank Broyles, and you're probably familiar with him, the
Yeah.
legendary Arkansas coach. I want to say he coached in the NFL, and he was
Mhm.
ahead of his time. I think he only lived on less than $50,000 a year budget, so he could, have long-term wealth. And I know we talked about that prior to this podcast. And what led you to a career in the financial industry?
Well, it's kind of funny. Like I said, God has had His hand on my life and still does. And I didn't know anything about finances. I'd never heard of the word mutual fund, investments. Um, what I heard about the stock market was whatever you do, don't put any money in the stock market because you lose all your money. And I was framing houses. I started framing at an early age. I was 12, getting ready to turn 13, and so a guy named Vic Bailey had hired me, and I worked for him for 9 years. That's really what my passion was. I wanted to get into building houses, but in Texas that year, the economy, the housing market cratered, and so nobody was building any houses. And the guys that I knew that had been doing that, a lot of them lost everything except for one of our guys that played linebacker with me at North Texas. He was the only one because he was more of a cash and carry guy, and then the guy that I worked for. And so it's like I got to get a real job. So I took a job with an industrial chemical company. Worst thing I'd ever done. Hated it. And but I got 2 years under my belt with them. That's all the blood they were going to get out of me. But while I was there, I got the opportunity to speak to business owners, how they got involved in business. If they had to do it over again, what would they have done different? Why they choose that career? And I gained a lot of wisdom and insight in speaking to them. And so when a college buddy of mine that was in the financial industry, making 4 times the money I was making, introduced me to the financial industry, it's like, well, I'm in debt. I'm not making a lot of money. He's making 4 times than I am, and it's like, I think I need to take a look at what you're doing, and so I did, and immediately fell in love with it. And like I said, Brian, this will be 40 years for me, you know, doing this.
Well, congratulations. That really makes a lot of sense, Mike, that athletes have that competitive mindset. And it sounds like you definitely went through the school of hard knocks. And I'm thinking of there was a lineman who played for the Ravens. I think his name was John Urashel. He left football to pursue a career in finance at MIT. I
Yep,
don't know if you're familiar with him.
I've heard of him, but I'm not that familiar with him.
And what are some of the biggest financial mistakes you see college athletes making today?
Well, it's different today than what it was 40 years ago, but they were when I was football kind of put me in a bubble, away from some things. But a lot of my friends that were going to college during college enrollment orientation, they had all these companies, bank companies, credit card companies, had these tables out there. Sign up for a free T-shirt, sign up for a koozie, and so here are these kids, they're getting this card, and there's a balance, a limit of 5,000 or whatever, and they sign up and they don't have a job, they don't have any revenue coming in, but now they got a credit card that's got a $5,000 limit, and all of a sudden, within the first semester or two, they put their books on there and other stuff, and they've got 1,000 or 1,500 dollars. And I understand the banks and the credit card companies what they're doing because they know the kids can't pay for it, so mom and dad will bail them out, and that's what happened. And when we talk about like football athletes, so the worst thing that they can do, especially if you're on a full ride today, the NIL income, I mean, some of that money is outrageous. It's crazy, 200,000, 400,000, half a million, a million, 2, 3 million. Some of the athletes that they have no. It's not that they didn't have the right to get paid that kind of money, but there should be a set of instructions that come along with it. And unfortunately, not to the fault of the kid, but all of a sudden you drop $1 million in somebody's lap or $500,000 and they don't know anything about it. The first thing they do is they might buy a house when they're in college. They might buy, an 80, 90, $100,000 car. And one things that they don't do is they didn't realize that, oh, by the way, you got to pay federal income taxes on this and state income taxes, depending on what state you're in. And so all of a sudden we got somebody that's literally spent the 300,000 they got in NIL money and didn't save a dime and didn't pay zero taxes on it. Now they're behind the eight ball. And Brian, so that means they got to wait till they get their next, payment. And then they got to pay, they're playing catch up. That's what so many athletes are doing, especially these high income earning athletes that play basketball and NFL. Um, you know, nobody's coached and mentored them on what they need to do. So,
Well, that's right. Yeah, money alone isn't enough without the right habits, of course. And there was an NBA player, Antoine Walker. He made 100 million, went bankrupt, and there was that ESPN 30 for 30. I love those 30 for 30s called Broke, and Drew Bledsoe and the
yeah,
quarterback before the GOAT, he went bankrupt. So many of these athletes, you're right. And
yeah,
like I've read, you know a lot more about this than me. So a lot of these NFL players will have to pay taxes in that state that they're playing in. So
yes,
really, whatever that they're making 50 million, it's automatically hacked down to 25. Plus, someone mentioned there's a jock tax in other states that
yes.
there's just a lot of different, things. You're right that can really cause a lot of problems. And what is your top advice for student athletes navigating NIL? And of course, in high school now in Georgia, they can utilize, monetize their name, image, and likeness. And yeah, I know you're in Gwinnett. Some of these big schools out in Gwinnett, Grayson, Norcross, and some of those schools. I'm sure some of their athletes are monetizing their NIL.
Yep. Well, we've got one of my clients. He played at Gainesville High School when they went to state a couple of years ago. But we've been watching him play. His dad and I are real good friends, but we've been watching him since he was 8 years old, and he's always played both ways. And his junior year, the team that he played for in high school, they threw something like 31 passes. They threw 28 to him. He caught every one of them. And we watched him at games where he ran back a punt return, a kickoff return, touchdown pass for 40, 50, 60 yards, those kind of things. But because he was 8 years old, I talked to his dad about setting up a UTMA, like a college account for when he does go to college, whether he plays ball or not, his education will get paid for. So we did that. And so uh, because he's like our godson, you can talk to people. I always talk to people the same way. It doesn't matter if they're related or not related. It's like, look, you got to do a couple of right things. Number one, you can't blow all the money. You gotta save. The most important thing that they can do, especially the first year they get the money, obviously they need to probably set aside 20% to pay the taxes. Then the rest of that money, they need to just sock it away. Okay. And it's hard to do because some of these kids is like, well, yeah, but I've earned this money and I can buy a car. Yeah, I got that. But you need to wait till the second year before you start doing those things. Okay. Because you got to act like it's not there. And for some of these kids, they're not the problem. Their parents are the problem because their parents don't have money. And so all of a sudden their son that's playing football is getting 600,000 and the parent says, yeah, we could use that money, you know, and the kid never sees any of it, if that makes sense. So,
Yeah, it does. And you're right. So many of these athletes don't make that. That's like the top 5%.
right.
Mainly, of course, football is number one and then basketball, but many of them don't. And you're right. They don't realize they do have to pay taxes. So there's just a lot of moving parts. And there's a lot of these terrible agents out there. You don't really have to be even registered at this point. And a lot of these contracts aren't good. They can sort of own their rights for life. So, definitely have to get it vetted by, a legitimate attorney before signing anything, because I've heard some stories of, terrible stories of athletes really getting ripped off.
Yep. I remember when I was probably 3 or 4 years in the financial advisory business, Troy Aikman from the Dallas Cowboys got paid $40 million. Okay. And he got paid 10 million of cash up front, but then the 30 million is what we called a defined benefit or deferred comp type benefit. And what happened is that understanding that somebody could literally get in a bad situation and blow that money was put into a contractual, and that he couldn't touch it until after he finished his football career, and then he could start siphoning money off that account. Well, by the time Troy Aikman finished his career, that money not only had doubled but quadrupled, and so he's been living off that for the last however many years he's been retired from football, you know. And so there are things that are out there that can protect the athlete. It's just how does the athlete even know who to talk to, because most people don't provide that guidance in that direction.
Yeah, he was definitely ahead of his time. It's amazing, Mike. Back then, 40 million seemed unbelievable. Now, Dak Prescott's making 60 million a year, and Mahomes over 50 million. That's not including endorsements. But yes, I was thinking about someone like Gronkowski. People think, oh, he's this dumb jock, but he
Yes,
just lives off endorsements. He tucked away all that salary. And
yes.
Marshawn Lynch, the former Seahawk, does the same thing. So those
Yeah.
guys are definitely role models on how to manage money for sure. And how can athletes set themselves up long term for financial success beyond their careers?
It's like anything, Brian. The most important thing is um, do your due diligence. Reach out to either someone that can refer you to somebody or a friend, whatever, and somebody that's in the industry, because they'll typically shoot straight with these athletes on what they need to do because we've seen it. We've seen what they've done and all that. But then here's the thing, just because somebody tells you to do something, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the right thing. Um, and we always say you can always find out the real stuff by Dr. Google, but I wouldn't say that Dr. Google is the best out there. But there are people that are out there that are financially successful. We hear them all the time. Ray Dalio, Warren Buffett. There were people out there like Peter Lynch. These are guys that they manage people's money. That's what they do. That's what they've done for a living. It's what they've done for their whole life is they manage people's money, companies' money. And it really is pretty basic and simple. Okay. Live below your means. Don't spend more money than you make. Set aside money, and there's opportunities, whether it's mutual funds that they can set aside, but they can put money in accounts that's going to grow average 10, 12% a year. That will make them a fortune. There was a young kid that played at Georgia Tech, defensive lineman, and this was probably right at about 10 years ago. He had $1 million signing bonus to go in the NFL. He was a pretty good athlete. And it's like, look, you can do that. Okay. But I promise you, if you just take 25,000 or 250,000, whichever one you do, and you set that aside, that money will be worth more money than you'll ever get paid in your NFL career. And it would be worth like 25 million by the time that he retired at 65. And you start thinking, well, that's just such a small portion, and that's just a one-time investment. But if it's invested, that's what it grows to. People don't realize that.
That's right. Yeah, that compound interest. What are some go-to books you would recommend?
So, somewhat.
Some books.
There's a great book. Um, it's more of a thinking book, but it's called Think and Grow Rich. Okay, because it talks about, understanding the realities of the world, about what people can be doing. And then there's a lot of financial books that are out there. There's a, a, a little pamphlet booklet that I give to clients. It's called How Money Works. And it's probably the simplest guide, but it touches on 10 points of mutual funds, investing, everything that we all need as a consumer. And then there's a couple other books, and I apologize, Brian, off the top of my head. I'm trying to think of the names of those, but it's not there. But um, as soon as we get done, it's like, oh yeah, you should have read this one or this one. But Peter Lynch has a book. Warren Buffett has a book on money and finances, and it's very easy to get what I call a PhD economics book, and you read that, and after you finish with it, you're more clueless than you were before you read it. Okay, we believe in dumbing it down. Okay, it's not as complicated as people make it to believe, but they want to do that so people shy away from doing what they need to do. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, great advice. There's that quote. I love that quote, do simple better. And those are some great books and some of the, classics, without a doubt. And I was also thinking, Mike, at the school that we help volunteer at, I always tell the students to open up a direct reinvestment plan, a DRIP plan.
Yes,
You can invest in companies like Walmart and Home Depot for as little as $25 a month. And I tell them, if you start that at 10 years old, by the time you're 50, you're going to have a huge nest egg. You know a lot more about this than me,
that's
but
correct.
you're right, that compounding interest. And I did it several years ago, and I was able to pay for my wife's, ring for her wedding, for our wedding. So without a doubt, I think drip plans are a great avenue too. And there's a great website for student athletes and parents called NIL Network, nilnetwork.com, that has a
Okay.
lot of really great resources out there. If there's one financial habit or mindset shift that could benefit every athlete, what would it be?
Live below your means. The quickest way to get into financial trouble is to go out there and start buying things. And the challenge is that we see tremendous great athletes. My next door neighbor, graduate of Auburn, defensive lineman, great athlete, was picked up and recruited by the Atlanta Falcons and played 3 years there. And his third year going in, he got his knee whacked. And so he was rehabbing. Then he got back in. Then he hurt it again during what do you call it? The preseason, getting back into shape and all that stuff. And so then the Falcons cut him, and but he had he introduced himself because he bought the house next door, and I told him what I did, and he said, "Wow, well, that's amazing. If you would do anything," and then it's like, well, you got to remember the NFL. That's an acronym that stands for two things. One is not for long. And if you blow all your money, you don't have any money left. You're not going to be able to live and survive. And I said, some people, I'm not a big proponent of paying off the house, but at the same time, that gets rid of one of your debts. And he bought a house and paid cash for it just to get that out his plate. And but he didn't go out there and buy cars. He had already had a car, and so he was doing the right things, and but he also had what we call a money manager that was paying his bills and all that stuff. That's where a lot of these kids get in trouble is they're paying somebody 100 grand a year to pay their mortgage payment, house payment, the car payments, all their debts and all that stuff, when they should do that themselves, you know. Uh, but the second thing that the NFL stands for is when the money's gone, you have no friends left. And that's when you find out who your real friends are. Okay. And that's what I said, Brian, when we were talking. Some of the guys that I've known since the third grade that we played high school football, there was six of us that would always work out after practice. Those six of us all played college ball. Okay. And those six, we still communicate 4 or 5 times a year. They're lifelong friends, and we all have different careers, but we've all been successful in business. So,
Yeah, excellent insight, Mike. Again, I'm thinking of someone like an Andre Rison, the former receiver for the Falcons. I
yeah,
used to read articles that he was throwing money up in the air in clubs and things like that. And then, of course, he went bankrupt. And then there was that great running back, Marcus Dupree, who was out in the 80s. He was supposed to be like the next, just Bo Jackson type player. It's around the same time, but then he got injured and, he lost everything. And then the movie Friday Night Lights, Boobie Miles, the running back,
yeah,
when he got hurt, everything went sideways. And I think he ended up going to prison and,
yeah.
some bad things happened in his life. So yeah, really, really good advice. I'm thinking on the flip side, someone like a Magic Johnson that turned into like a mogul that really manages money right and did all the right things. A-Rod, the baseball player. So many of these guys like that have really
Michael
gone to the
Jordan.
next level. Can you talk about who are some of your favorite athletes, and can you talk about some of the athletes that you've worked with and
Yeah.
coaches?
Well, growing up in Texas, there's only one school, and that's the University of Texas. And Darrell Roy was the head coach. My hero was Earl Campbell. He was number 20, and he just pulverized teams, as a running back, not only in the college level, but also when he played for the Houston Oilers. And he hurt people. They felt it when they tackled him. And so through the years, you have great coaches, and I know some people say, they didn't like Bear Bryant, but Bear Bryant was a great coach. Okay. Kirby Smart's a great coach. Okay. Nick Saban's a great coach. And so when you have great coaches, they surround themselves with great players. And as a result of that, they mentor these players. I look at what, oh gosh dog it, I just had him in my head, but he coached for San Francisco when Joe Montana was there, Jerry Rice was there,
Bill Walsh.
yeah, Joe Walsh. Okay.
Yeah, Bill Walsh. Yes.
And one of the key things that he did that you can use also in anything that was relatable in business is you got to evaluate the player. One of the things that Joe Montana was not known for, he was not the long ball thrower. He couldn't heave it, 50 yards or 60 yards down the field, but he was precision sharp on those 10, 15, 20-yard passes. And so if you got a player like that, you got to build the team around that kind of player, you know. And there's another movie out. I don't remember the name of the movie, but it's about Kurt Warner and his career, and it's a great family movie worth watching. But it talks about some of the things that he went through, and I think the key thing for him is perseverance, not giving up on what he knew he was capable of doing. You know, anybody can become wealthy in America. Anybody can become debt free, but not investing and staying in debt is going to keep you from achieving that goal. You know,
No, that's right. Yeah, Bill Walsh, talking about the 49ers coach, I think he was sort of way ahead of his time with that West Coast offense. And
yes,
he was probably Bill Belichick, before Belichick
yes,
was really a mastermind of the game. I
yeah,
did see that movie. I can't remember the name of it, but I know he was like a stalker. He was stocking shelves at like Kroger, Winn-Dixie, when he
right,
played arena football. But that's an excellent, you're right, it's a really good family movie, a great movie for teams to watch.
yes,
If you just Google it, you can definitely find that.
yes,
So this has been great. Is there anything you'd like to add, something I didn't ask that you would like to share?
yeah. There's a couple of simple concepts that are out there. We hear about the IRA, we hear about the Roth IRA. One grows tax deferred, one grows tax free. I know the NFL has a pension, but I think you have to be there now either 4 or 5 years before you're even eligible to participate in their pension. And that would be something that the teams should all look at doing. Even the NFL just providing something where something as simple as 10% of their income could go into an account like a 401k. So they're going to have money. I mean, that's the key thing is that I was taught when you made money, my dad said, you got to set it aside. So he took a old cigar box and put these like this little wood in it. And he says, okay, this is your savings. This is your expenses. This is your taxes. And so you got $1 and, you put a quarter in your taxes, a quarter in your savings, and then you got a quarter that goes for a future purchase like a car or whatever, and then a quarter that you live on. And he taught me that, but he didn't have any money saved. They didn't save any money. They didn't have any money invested until I got involved in the business. I was able to retire my parents because of that. you know but those simple concepts, we think, well, that's simple. Yeah, but it's the simple things that we need to know. It's not the complicated things you know
Yeah, I love that old school advice. Yeah, unfortunately, with all the reality TV and everything out there, it's like you see what everyone else has and they want all this. So that's the unfortunate part about it. But there are a lot of student athletes now that are giving away like 30% of their income to
yeah.
charities. And so they are paying it forward. It seems like a lot of the female athletes are
Yes,
really entrepreneurial, and I'll give them a shout out. I think women are typically 10 years more mature than guys.
they are.
So they tend to do much better. I know my wife is definitely compared to me, but without a doubt, there's a lot of athletes doing a lot of great things. But you're right, that not for long league, the average running back, I want to say, Mike plays for 3 years. So, and then these players, I heard David Green, the former Georgia player, he was a backup for Seattle, played in I think Central or South Gwinnett High
Yep,
School. He mentioned this, you make all this money when you're 20, 21, 22, the most money you'll ever make, and then sort of it goes downhill from there. Whereas, of course, it's opposite for 99.9% of everyone else.
correct, correct. Yeah, and again, the players, they want to get their money up front. Hey, if you're going to pay me 300 million, I want my 300 million, or I'm going to get paid over 10 years, however they set that up. And the industry would be better off stacking it on the back end, a little less on the front end, for two reasons. One, keeps them from going deep into debt. When you don't have any money, when you first start off in life, Brian, and you don't have any money, and you can't qualify for anything, so you're not going to go buy today, you know, an 80, 90, $100,000 car. Back in those days, you bought a fixer upper, an old junker, clunker, whatever you want to call it, but you might have paid $1,000 or $2,000, and that was stretching it, you know. But you live below your means, you afforded something, and that's probably one of the things that I see a lot of the parents do for kids is that they hey, they're doing good in school. They're junior, sophomore, junior in high school. They got their driver's license, and they give them a brand new Charger, a brand new Mustang, you know. And it's like, okay, yeah, you can afford that, but at the same time, what are you doing to that kid? Because he thinks that that's the lifestyle he needs to have, but he didn't have the income yet, you know. So,
I love that advice. That's what my dad always told me, what are you going to look forward to later in life? You
yep.
have everything at, 21, 22 years old. So it does set a bad precedent. I completely agree. How can others contact you, Mike, if they want to reach out for financial advice?
I usually tell people that call me or text me. My clients have my cell phone, and that's 615-582-9650. That's usually the best number. If I don't answer the phone, like doing the podcast, I wouldn't answer the phone or whatever, and they can leave a message or they can text later. or they can always email me. And Brian, I think you have my email. That's mikewpfs@gmail.com. Very easy. Mike, M-I-K-E, W as in water, wealth, pfs@gmail.com. And most of my clients, when they need stuff, you know, it's the clients that I have, I've had clients for 30, 40 years, 5, 10, 15 years as well. But I don't lose clients. Clients stay because we're almost like family from a relationship. They can ask me specific questions. And Brian, if I don't have the answer, it's like, okay, here's where you need to go to get the answer that you need. And it might be their accountant, their CPA, whatever, but we want to guide them. And that's what people want is give me the direction where I can find the information. And most companies don't do that, unfortunately.
Well, that's
So,
right, Mike. When I met you a few months ago and I heard you introduce yourself, I'm like, that's the person I want to meet. I
mhm.
just felt like you were trustworthy and you had a lot of information, but mainly you have a lot of wisdom and you have a kindness about you. So those are the two most important things that I took when I first met you. So I really appreciate this. This has
Yeah.
been some excellent information. And I'm going to post this. I have a YouTube channel called NIL
Okay.
Mindset. I also
Okay.
have a website called nilinsight.com. That's nilinsight.com. So if
Okay.
you'd like to be a guest on this show, please reach out to me. My number is 404-433-7490, or you can email me at BRIAN Brian 3008 at iCloud.com. And I hope the listeners, you all learned something today. And this has been excellent, Mike. I really appreciate this. And we thank you and thank the listeners. And until then, we'll see you next time.
Okay.
Thank you again, Mike.
Thank you, Brian. Have a great day.